Fighting fire with fire, protesters in Yangon hurl Molotov cocktails at police prepared to shoot with live ammunition.
This group of brave protesters in Yangon was small, but their message was loud. We will never be frightened.
With the highest daily death toll and dozens of protesters hurt, it was Myanmar's bloodiest day since the coup. Despair like this is all too common in Myanmar now. Another 50 families.
I would like to caution listeners that the upcoming interview touches upon various topics that some listeners may find upsetting. In an effort to tell the real story of what is now happening in Myanmar, we encourage our guests to share as they feel comfortable doing, affirming that this platform can bear the weight of their story. As traumatic as the events have obviously been for our guests, they can even affect those of us listening from a distance as well. Every member of our team has shed a tear at some point or another in the process of bringing these interviews to you. And you might similarly find yourself affected by this story. If you feel some of this content may be upsetting, maybe consider listening in stages or whatever way that works. But please listen to bear witness to this guest story. For this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast, we are talking to Jay, who is speaking to us from Australia, but as we will learn through this discussion, has found himself deeply involved in the Myanmar resistance to the military and has been doing whatever he can in his capacity to be able to help those that are resisting the military, as we'll learn more. So, Jay, thank you for making yourself available to have this conversation with us at Insight Myanmar.
Yeah, no worries. There'll obviously be some things that I can't talk about just due to security and that sort of stuff, not only for myself, but for retaliation with the people I work with down in Karenni State. I'm sure junta intelligence sort of gather information from these podcasts and whatnot. But I'm quite young. I joined the Australian Army at a young age. When I was 18, actually, so quite young. I was qualified in medical training, so combat medical training, so combat trauma, which is a lot more different than, your usual public hospitals and that sort of stuff. Combat trauma has its own sort of set of rules and that sort of stuff. But I did about 5 years in the Australian Army, then discharged and worked in the private security sector. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether you or your viewers know a country called Papua New Guinea, but it's sort of off the coast of the northern coast of Australia. It's quite a small little country, and they're quite poverty-stricken and essentially a third world country. So actually before the Army, I went there with a charity group to assist in any way we can, which was predominantly construction for remote villages. And after I got out of the Army, I pretty much went there once every year, or tried to go there every year for about a month. I guess you'd call it philanthropy sort of stuff, but we helped with medical cases. Papua New Guinea is actually one of the highest domestic violence rates in the world, so a lot of violence against women and that sort of stuff. And it's quite a corrupt corrupt country, so pretty poor. But yeah, outside of the army, I used my army background and qualifications to sort of help down there. So yeah.
Right. So that was before Myanmar. That was the only real experience you had applying your training.
Yeah, correct. Papua New Guinea, yeah.
Right. So, one of the questions we often have when someone chooses to involve themselves in the struggle going on in Myanmar, who doesn't have extensive connections to the country, as it sounds like you didn't, is the basic question of how did Myanmar come on the radar for you? And then how did you decide to make this really extraordinary decision to be involved in the way that you were?
Yeah, good question. So I'd say about a year ago now, just on social media, scrolling as everyone does. Before this, I wouldn't have been able to point out where Burma is on a map. So I think I was just on Instagram or one of the other social media platforms and just came across a reel highlighting the things going on over there. And then I delved a bit deeper. And then all of a sudden I was just hooked. And, everyone knows about what's happening in Ukraine, Gaza and that sort of stuff. I've got a few old army mates that are in Ukraine with the Foreign Legion down there helping out. And everyone knows about what's going on over there, but absolutely no one knows what's going on in Burma. And I just got hooked and started learning as much as I can about it for about a year and delving into the Karenni community where I live, which is small. They're mostly refugees, that sort of stuff. And I just fell in love with the people. Similar to Papua New Guineans as well. They'll just do anything for you. And it just shocked me about the atrocities going on over there, especially in 2024. And they get pretty much zero help from anyone. And, you have America funding Ukraine and sending weapons and aid and that sort of stuff. And the other wars happening, but these people have absolutely nothing. And personally, if you were to ask me, I think more atrocities and worse atrocities are being committed in Burma than any war at the moment in such a high rate. But yeah, it just literally came across it on social media, and then I was just hooked and decided I needed to do something.
So you described seeing that reel and then that reel drawing you in to want to learn more about a place that, in your words, you couldn't find on a map before, and then spending a year familiarizing yourself with the dynamics of exactly what's going on here, how the conflict is unfolding, trying to understand something that even people have put decades of their careers into this very complex story and still barely understanding it. So in that year of self-study, what beyond the real, what was it that started to pull you in to this being a story that you wanted to care about and then do more than care about, actually involve yourself in?
Yep. So good question. So I would just say it's the crimes against the children. I have a child myself, and we're extremely lucky to be in a Western country such as Australia or America, and that sort of stuff, where my child can grow up relatively safe. And you see the reels and the videos and the articles about children being murdered. And all sorts of stuff, and that really pulled on my heartstrings and big time. So I'd say that was the driving factor of me wanting to do something. And within that year, I tried donating to a few orphanages as well. That the war in Burma has left kids in orphanages in Thailand. But sending money is all well and good, and it helps a lot. And I'm sure they're very grateful. I wanted to take it a step further, so.
Right. And we should mention, I've just been working on some documents myself, and just to give some numbers for listeners to understand the context of what you're saying, think recent numbers I've seen is that there's 3.4 million that are displaced. 40% of those are children, just a staggering statistic. You look at the food insecurity that's taking place and how many children are, I don't have the percentages offhand with that, but the numbers of kids that are now growing up without proper food, pregnant mothers who also don't have proper food, how that's stunting growth and development, and then to say nothing of education and how going back since the time of COVID through now, just the assault that schools have been under. I mean, schools have literally been bombed. The children have literally died in their classrooms from military forces bombing them or assaulting them or using them as staging grounds. And so the context of the real assault on the nation's youth that their own military has launched, is really just staggering and beyond the pale.
It's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Right. So you then mention how beyond this self-study, you then start to become familiar with the Burmese, and in this case, the Karenni that are in your neighborhood. And, it's interesting because we've spoken on the other side of this, we've spoken to any number of ethnic minorities in Myanmar who have resettled in other countries and have referenced how hard it is for them to express their identity as kind of a third culture kid to their host community. People barely know Burma on the map, let alone, Karenni or Chin or Karen or something like that. But it sounds like in pretty short order, you were able to have some understanding of this and to reach out not just to the Bamar diaspora, but specifically to the Karenni diaspora. So I wonder how that happened, and also if there is, I'm not aware of this, if there is a sizable Karenni diaspora in where you're located in Australia.
Yeah, so I suppose that the way I got onto them is, and you're right, there are almost a million different ethnic tribes in Burma and that sort of stuff. And I guess the Karenni is probably one of the biggest in Australia, or where I am in a particular part of Australia. So that's how I got onto them. And the way I did was I'm pretty sure I just Googled Karenni sort of society near me, and there turned out to be a charity that they get together, and they actually make pretty good documentaries and movies as a way to fundraise. So I just shot off an email saying, hey, I'd like to meet you guys and that sort of stuff and be a part of the community. I know what's going on over there, and yeah, just trying to show my support. And then it was just they welcomed me with open arms, and I think they really, not only in Australia, but when I was over there, they really appreciate, a non-Burmese person sort of showing interest like that, which breaks my heart. I mean, everyone should be interested in it. And so, just started talking to them, and then decided that, hey, look, I have a particular set of qualifications, being a combat medic and stuff. So I'd love to go over there and help you if you had me. And then, long story short, got an invite and made my way over there. So.
Wow, that's quite amazing. I mean, as you're making, it's quite amazing from both sides, really. I mean, the trust on their side for their connection and trust in your integrity, but then on your side, the real. I mean, this is not something without danger and real danger. And so, from your side, talk about, and you mentioned having a child of your own. Talk about the process you had to go through of now stepping up your involvement to actually risking your own safety to be able to be on the side of this battle.
Yes. So obviously, I need finances. So it took me a while just to save up a bit of money for everything that I would need to go over there and self-sustain. I didn't want to ask them for money and that sort of stuff. I mean, they have enough going on, that sort of stuff. But I suppose danger-wise, there's always a risk. I'm not Burmese whatsoever. I don't speak the language and that sort of stuff. But
had you ever been anywhere in Southeast Asia before?
No, not even for a holiday. So haven't been there at all. So first time with everything.
Uh-huh. So, talk about how you prepared for that trip, both physically in whatever way you had to prepare your body and what you were bringing, and then also mentally and emotionally.
Yes. So, being from the military, although it was quite a while ago, I did sort of maintain a certain amount of fitness that you do need in sort of combat areas, whether you're just a medic, observer, or and that sort of stuff. But yeah, nothing prepared me for how mountainous Kearney State was. Um, But yeah, just done a lot of physical training, sort of pack marching, we call it in the army, just putting on your pack that you're living out of, and walking up hills and hiking and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I always maintain a pretty good level of fitness, and I did know that I didn't want to be a liability when I got over there as well. I didn't want them to have to slow down for me or carry my belongings, which I've seen happen in Papua New Guinea and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to hold my own, and yeah.
Right. So that was the physical way that you prepared yourself to be able to take a trip of this undertaking. What about emotional?
I didn't really give much thought of it. I mean, obviously, it's a very dangerous place, and being in the army for quite a number of years sort of mentally prepares you for that sort of stuff. And when I got back, people were like, you don't really know these people, and you're risking your life for them and stuff. But I mean, as a human, I can't really sit back and watch these kids being killed like that. So yeah, just needed to do something. So yeah, I guess the number of years I spent in the army mentally prepared me for it, really.
Right. And you mentioned how when you came in contact with the Karenni community there, just how much they blew you away with the way that you engage with them and their values and personality. Can you describe a bit more of what that was that really impressed you?
Yeah. So I guess, for example, I don't know what I was expecting, sort of me going to this fundraiser slash movie, which was at a university that they hide out the cinema sort of thing. Really didn't know what I was expecting, whether I was going to see other non-Burmese people there and that sort of stuff. There must have been a few hundred there for the premiere, for the screening, but I'm pretty sure I was the only non-Burmese person there, and they were a bit hesitant at the start, and that goes for when I was actually in the country as well. But once they realize your intentions, they just they came and gave me food, like they didn't even know me, and that goes in the country and in my home country as well. And you just get the vibe that these people would do anything for you, really.
So it strikes me that you, as an Australian, are going into this conflict zone to help these people fighting for their human rights, their democracy, fighting to stop, to resist their children from being murdered. I mean, this is, you can't get much more severe than this. And you are doing this as an individual Australian. And it begs the question of what is the larger apparatus of the country and the government of Australia doing to engage on the side of the forces of democracy. And so as you found yourself getting more involved in this crisis, I'm sure that you also started to look at what your government was doing in relation to it. And so what did you find there?
Yeah, so one of the first things I'd done really was I wanted to know what the world is doing, because it's just so crazy that surely some countries are doing something about it. Unfortunately, it's not what I expected. For example, I know Australia is one of five, I believe, in January 2024 that introduced financial sanctions against the junta, which I'm sure helps, but it's nowhere near enough that that they need to be doing. But I suppose it's a start. But yeah, just sanctions. I believe Australia has introduced. So
Right. So moving into your journey of uh, flying to Southeast Asia and eventually finding yourself in Karenni, I don't want to ask any questions here because I understand there's a confidentiality of how exactly you got to where you're going.
Mhm.
So just to whatever degree you feel comfortable and safe sharing about the nature of that journey.
Yeah, so I I won't dive too deep into the country that I initially had to go to, but yeah, just took a flight, met up with my translator. So I was in contact with him. I was in contact with him for a while before I actually left and pulled the trigger on it. And yeah, so long story short, I met up with him outside of Burma, and I essentially smuggled myself into Burma. So
And what was that experience like? You mentioned you've never been to Southeast Asia even on holiday. So what was striking you about that?
yeah, so I did give myself a few days just to stage everything, and I think it was my 30th birthday then as well. So yeah, I suppose one of my biggest worries was getting into the country. I very much do not want to get caught by the junta. I know they would do terrible things to me if they did get the chance, as well as any other borderline countries as well. I understood that I was taking a risk for my own personal security, as well as the people that are helping me as well. Although it's black and white for an absolute good cause, there are risk involved as well, and it was just a matter of me weighing those risks up, um, and yeah, went ahead with it.
And so you managed to make a border crossing somewhere, you with your interpreter, and then
Mhm.
presumably you meet up with the Karenni forces, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very tactical, the border crossing. Not going to go too much into it, but it had to be nighttime and that sort of stuff, and had to take certain precautions, you know, covering my skin and that sort of stuff because, as you can imagine, I stand out quite a lot over there. But it was a success, and crossed the border. And actually, about 30 minutes of me crossing to the border, we got three mortars. They landed quite a distance away from us, most likely 81 millimeter mortars. But yeah, that was a bit of an awakening. So had to just yeah,
And you had never been in conflict before, correct?
correct, yes.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, you're trained as a medic, you've been in difficult situations, but
Mhm.
those difficult situations before this have not included conflict. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, that's right. I sort of I guess as cheesy as it sounds, and you hear it on movies and that sort of stuff. I mean, your training does sort of kick in when it comes down to it. When it comes down to being mortared, there's not much you can do about it except for covering concealment. But yeah, later on down in my trip, the combat sort of situations would arise. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that later on. But yeah, I suppose all the years of training paid off, and remained cool headed, and yeah.
It also strikes me as you're saying this, you're talking about how the training kicks in. And of
Mhm.
course, one has to recall that these millions of citizens and children that are under assault have had no such training, and the
Yeah,
trauma
that's
they're
right.
going through must just be unimaginable.
Yeah, like I'm a grown man with Western soldiering experiences and being mortared, and as you said, there's 8-year-old kids, 8-year-old boys and girls, newborn babies, and mothers holding their children being mortared. So that's that's something to really think about. So I'm scared, but imagine the 5-year-old that was being mortared as well. So
And what did you see of their reaction when you were in those combat situations?
It's just another day for them, really. It's just another day, and that's sad. No, they shouldn't live like that at all. And there was a time at the end of my trip where we unfortunately hit the anti-tank mine and lost three men. We had the funeral. Sure, I'll dive into it deeper later on, but there was 500 people plus at this funeral. It was a huge funeral, right on the border between Burma and its neighboring country. And I remember everyone looking up, and there was a Burmese scout plane, checking out the funeral, and it wasn't even in Burmese airspace as well. So it completely violated that law, which unfortunately the neighboring country, I guess, sort of puts up with, and plays a bit of both sides of things. But yeah, seeing the kids and the mothers grab their children at the funeral, and run away because a Burmese scout plane is flying over, and usually after a scout plane comes a jet or a MiG, Russian supplied jet. Yeah, it just sucked seeing him like that. So
This is going on 4 years that they've been facing these airstrikes and this terror from above. I can't even imagine.
yeah, terrible.
So moving on with your story, we left off where you're getting mortared just as you're crossing the border. Tell us what happens next.
Yeah, so it was only 3 rounds that junta fired. Fortunately, they stopped, and didn't bracket us too well. But yeah, that was literally about 30 minutes into me being in the country. This happened while we were sort of waiting for our ride into the front line, at their sort of little staging area, as well as their medical facility. And I say medical facility, it was pretty much just a hut with an oxygen tank. And I remember just sitting there, just waiting for the ride, and just looking at this hut and thinking, I've never seen anything like that. Being in Australia, or another Western country, whether it's a hospital or a clinic, it's not like this. It's terrible the way they have to do things. And I remember talking to the medic. There was sort of the head medic. She was a sort of a middle-aged lady, very nice lady. She spoke pretty good English. And she sort of ran the medical facility and the medics down there. And I remember talking to her, and she said, "This is all we got." Like, she was quite proud of her oxygen tank in the corner there. And I just thought, that it shouldn't be like this. Yeah.
And so as you start to settle in there and you make your introductions, what is it, what role are you starting to take on during your stay?
Yes. So I was always going to go there sort of as a combat medic. My first time there, discussed with the Karenni people and the Karenni government, was just getting a feel of things, and observing. And then when I did needed to act, or they needed any help, or someone around me, I would jump in and give them that help. And later on in my trip, I sort of had to do that quite a few times. So yeah, just didn't really see any injured persons, whether that be Karenni army soldiers or Karenni civilians, for the first few days. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what did you observe up close on the ground about how this conflict is playing out? Because this is something that you're following online and through the news as much as you can. Being on the ground must have given you a different perception.
Yeah, I suppose I was looking at it very deeply, and pretty much every day. News articles, documentaries, every documentary that came out from a Western media, I would jump on and watch pretty much straight away. But I suppose boots on the ground, I I would say it's what I expected when I first initially got there. But then the last week we were there was, as you know, and some of the viewers know by the photos posted on your Instagram, was when the one of the Hiluxes ran over an anti-tank mine. That's, I wasn't expecting something that sort of sneaky, if you will. Although, we all know junta love to plant landmines and that sort of stuff. But for them to actually get that deep into Karenni State sort of blew my mind a little bit. But yeah, overall, I'd say it was what I expected. Some things weren't, some things weren't. I guess like the environment that they're living in, and little things like these soldiers don't get paid and things like that. So a few things blew me away a little bit and shocked me. But yeah.
What were some of those things?
I guess I'll have to think about it. How corrupt the Burmese government really are. You hear things on the news, but then talking to the Burmese people, my translator, for example, was telling me, May Online sort of, he owns his own telecommunications company and gives his own SIM cards out, and tries forces the population to buy his SIM cards, and he's assigned his children certain duties that essentially are just money pigs. They're just getting money from the people. What else? I guess China's involvement in that sort of stuff. And, just talking to each individual person and hearing their stories. I remember one girl, this was in a refugee camp, which is quite hard living. There's about 20,000 Karenni refugees in this camp. And I remember talking to her, or they introduced me to her, and she's missing both of her legs. She would have been about 18 when I talked to her. But she told me the story through my translator that she was at hospital, working at a hospital, and junta bombed the hospital, and she lost both of her legs. And she was 16 at the time. Mm. So those things shocked me. You see it on documentaries and that sort of stuff, and you can easily pay it off. But when the proof is in front of you, yeah, it's confronting.
When the proof is in front of you, when you're talking to someone like that, what are the feelings it evokes in you? Is it rage or horror or sadness or helplessness? What is the feeling when you're in front of someone whose life is ahead of them and just has faced this unfair, terrible, senseless act?
Yeah. So, as cheesy as it sounds, you just feel absolutely lucky that, I have a passport and I get to go on a plane, come back to Australia into a beautiful house, and my child's safe and I'm safe and I'm not going to get bombed in the hospital. I just felt lucky, and it's not fair. Like, why do I get to come home to all that? But this poor girl was 16 years old, and her own government dropped a bomb on her and blew her legs off out of hospital. Yeah, it's just not fair. And then, you follow up emotions, rage. Yeah, it's just, especially in 2024. I mean, it's unacceptable. And I wish the world would do more, but I know the junta are on the ropes a little bit. So fingers crossed, given a few years, they'll have more freedom. But yeah.
And these individuals that you're speaking to that have been harmed, how would you characterize their attitude, having lived through these this pain and suffering and loss that they've come out of?
Yeah, so I would personally say that these people are the most hopeful and joyful, race I've ever come across. They have so much hope. Pretty much all of them said to me, I want to come to Australia one day, or these are my plans, and And, no matter what's happened to their body or their mind or their family, that are their plans. They haven't given up. These people will never give up. I mean, look at the resistance. It's they're not getting funding. I mean, initially at the start they were using homemade weapons and slingshots sort of thing. So these people don't give up, and they're absolute warriors.
Now, one of the things that we've covered in looking at the shape of resistance and speaking to others who've gone into the country and embedded or supported in different ways is how these different resistance groups are coming together. And that could mean, on one hand, the Karenni and the other ethnic groups that are fighting their own fight. And I don't know to what degree you saw kind of outside of the Karenni community, how they were aligning or communicating with other ethnicities. And it could also mean within the Karenni themselves, because every ethnic group also has their own local factions and divisions and units that are sometimes aligned and sometimes not. And so as I understand you're a foreigner, it's your first time here, you don't speak the language, but were you able to gain some kind of insight or sense into this essential question that everyone is asking is to what degree is there alignment and harmony, and to what degree is there tension between some of these different anti-junta groups?
Yeah, so I wasn't fortunate enough to sort of go outside Karenni State. My whole trip there, I was pretty much just with the Karenni Army. But, talking to them and talking to my interpreter and other English speakers for quite a while, you do get a sense that there is a bit of friction within the communities, Karenni Army, KNDF, and that sort of stuff. But I suppose they're all, especially the leadership, they're all aware of the fact that they're going to need each other to take this country back. Which is a good thing, and I suppose they could be working together more to become more of an effective fighting force. But I think it's quite an achievement that they're working together at this rate that they are, regardless. So you just get a feel that there is a bit of friction. Well, personally, that's what I felt, but they are working together towards a common goal. Right.
And another common question that we've covered in these types of interviews is the question of control, and what does it mean to control a territory, control a land, to have it contested, to look at local governance and security structures when a land is so-called liberated, and that term needs a lot of unpacking, as we've done on past interviews. But for your time in the Karenni territories, I don't know to what degree you were traveling and to what degree these were contested or on the front lines or being nominally controlled by one side or the other. What can you talk about kind of this question of who's actually holding and administering control of different land territories?
Yeah, so I didn't travel around that much. The front line I was in was quite small and secluded. But I suppose to answer your question, Karenni is one of the fortunate states, I believe, that has essentially remained unpenetrated by any outside hostile forces. So they take quite a lot of pride in that, which they should. The Civil War's been going on for almost 75 years, and they've still remained pretty independent. And they would. My personal view is they would just like to keep it that way, just run their own things, and without fear of being murdered and genocided, essentially.
And were you able to visit any of the IDP camps? And if so, what was your reaction there?
Yeah, so I did visit one on in a neighboring country to Burma. It was 20,000 strong, and in this particular country, there were about 17 IDP camps / refugee camps. I only went to the one, and this one was 20,000 strong, which is crazy. 20,000 is a lot of people. Westerners weren't allowed in there, but I managed to get in there. And the living conditions are terrible, absolutely terrible. I visited a few schools. It's hard. It's just hard for them, and yeah, the living conditions terrible. I know the UN does sort of help out. Well, this refugee camp I was in particularly, but they could be doing a lot more because the way they're living is horrendous. But like I was saying before, they still have hope. Like these kids are still running around happy. But yeah, it's a horrendous living situation.
Where do you think this hope comes from?
I think it comes down to their religious faith, partly. Majority of Karenni people are Christians, and they very much keep their faith, which helps them and which is a good thing, my personal view. Other than that, I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, these people have been kicked around so much. I don't know where they get it. Like us Western people, if we were put through anything like that, we wouldn't last or be as vibrant as these people are. I don't know where they get it. They're just warriors, really, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in a Western country, we have a spot of traffic or a power outage or something like that, and everyone's losing their mind. And
well, that's it. Yeah, I remember getting back from Burma, and like these little inconveniences that inconvenience us mean absolutely nothing compared to what these people have to go through. I remember I got back and I was driving from the airport, and my Uber was late, and my Uber was late, or they cancelled on me. I can't really remember, and I was just thinking, oh, what a pain in the ass. And then I thought, how lucky am I to be able to call an Uber to go to a house and not just sleep on the ground in the jungle trying to run away from people that are trying to shoot me, Yeah, it's crazy. And I just wish us Western people would think like that. But unless it's in front of you, society doesn't really care, I think. So
so do you feel personally like you've been changed in some way since coming back from a trip like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my work is absolutely not finished helping these people. I'm trying to start up a charity that essentially is going to fund medical equipment for these people. When we did hit the mine, it really shocked me how little medical equipment we had. I mean, we only had 2 tourniquets, and I suppose it was lucky that only one person got his leg blown off because both tourniquets were used on him to stop the bleeding. Anyone else lost their leg, that would have just bled out, or we would have had to jimmy rig a tourniquet. And tourniquets, I can go and buy one in Australia for $20, somewhere, or $20 somewhere, and it's just something that small that we can give that's really going to save lives at the end of the day.
So you had referenced before how your first few weeks there followed some pattern, but then the last week was really an outlier, and we wanted to come back to that later. So tell us about what happened that was different that week that stood out from your initial few weeks in the country.
Yeah, so I suppose there was quite a lot of combat. There are trench systems and that sort of stuff, so firing back and forth. The threat of being bombed via Russian supplied jets. That happened quite a bit. But the last week, sort of a few things happened all in one. I remember we were on a defensive position, sort of in trenches in Karenni State on this quite a large feature / mountain. And about 2.4 kilometers away was one of the junta sort of forward observation bases on an even bigger hilltop. They were sort of dug in pretty well. I did see satellite photos of their setup, and there aren't many junta bases left in Karenni State, but the ones that are there, you can tell they're still there for a reason. They're quite impenetrable. Their defenses are very good. They took their time. But anyway, so we're at 2.4 Ks away from this particular one. And about a week prior to that, we heard them try and run through a village. Luckily, the 10 people that were there, sort of an IDP village, they managed to get out in time. But when they did get back to their sort of temporary homes, they were burnt and that sort of stuff. But they were, so fast forward, they were getting their choppers in to do resupplies. So resupplies with, weapons, mainly mortars and artillery, indirect sort of ammunition, as well as food. They sort of drop it in, as well as fresh troops as well. So what has happened was when they were flying in, they spotted an IDP camp, and there was about 8 people, and we think they were trying to flee from Karenni State towards the refugee camp in a neighbouring country. And so we think they spotted them as the fresh troops were getting flown into the base, and we were just sitting on the defensive position. I started hearing sporadic gunfire. So we had a bit of an idea what was going on. And for me, when contacts did happen, it was sort of difficult because of the language barrier to get information and that sort of stuff. But my interpreter said he thinks that they're attacking the IDPs. So we packed up, or we sent the element, about half us packed up because we were the closest force there, to go there as fast as we could. And, it took us, with the terrain in Burma, 100 meters will take you about 20 minutes to get through, given how dense the jungle is and how high all the mountains are. So it took us quite a while to get there and to actually find them. But we did end up finding them, but unfortunately we were too late. And I remember seeing sort of these half burnt bodies. It's the stench of it was still around, and the smoke was still there. And there was, you can make out that there was a little boy, I'd probably say, maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 years old. I remember he was wearing a Spider-Man jumper or shirt, sorry. And they were all just piled up. They've been shot, the shell casings are still there, and that sort of stuff. And that's what we were hearing. We were on defensive position. They attempted to try and burn the bodies, but didn't do a very good job. I know they attempt to burn the evidence of all the atrocities they do. So these things can't be documented. We got there just in time to see this. And there was about 3 kids that they murdered. So we tried the platoon tried finding them, but they were already back in their fob before we could do anything. So that was hard hitting, and that really shows, like I was saying before, you'll see it on the news, you'll see it on reels and social media and that sort of stuff, but you know it's not a lie when it's right in front of you. So
it's so horrific. It's and I think for those that are listening that maybe haven't tuned into this conflict so extensively, I think to ask the obvious question that would be burning on their mind: why in the world would the soldiers be doing this? Is it some sadistic violence? Is it wanting to terrorize the population into submission? Is it just because they're trained to be a hammer and everything's a nail? Or what? There is no. I want to preface this by saying there is no good reason or any rationale that could ever be explained that would make sense as to why they would take target practice on fleeing children and civilians that are just trying to be safe. There's nothing that can explain this, but I think it does beg the question for those that aren't so familiar with the brutality of this military as to what objective they would have, what incentive they would have of why they would want to do this.
Yeah. So, as soon as we got there and I saw it all, and we made sure everything was secure. That's one of the first things I asked my interpreter. I said, why? Why did they do it? And I think it's all of the above you just said. You ask yourself, why did the Nazis do what they done in World War One to all the Jews? And a lot of it is, I'm just following orders or just being brainwashed and that sort of stuff. And he said it might have been that they needed food because I know the Burmese army don't take care of their own soldiers. A lot of them die of starvation, so it could have been them just going and trying to steal food and just executing the people that they just killed. It might have been they were on opium. The soldiers were high on opium. I think it's all of it. It might have been that they were Christian and that they ordered to kill Christians, and I think it's just pure evil. And it's evil.
And what were you able to observe about the response of those Karenni that you were with? I mean, they must be, this isn't new to them,
Yeah. I did ask my interpreter, I said, do you see this a lot? And he said, I've seen it a lot. But, pretty much every single one of them was shed a little tear, especially seeing the children, especially the men, us guys that have their own kids. There was a bit of anger, which is justified, hopelessness, maybe we're wishing they got there quicker or we got there quicker, but just a whole lot of emotions. I mean,
I mean, and I can imagine that must be a scene and an experience that you're still processing in your life as you go forward. And yet that's one encounter you had on a visit there. And as you mentioned, you have the passport allowing you to go to safety. These are people that are encountering this over and over and over and over again with no support while they're continuing their effort to try to resist and eventually topple this military.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy that this is happening, and like it's chalk and cheese. Like my life compared to their lives, like it's just I have such security, and I can have kids and not worry about this stuff. And just to think about these people having to worry about that and have to go through this, as you said, daily. This isn't just a once a year occurrence. This is every day. This is every day for them. It's sad, but yeah.
And you mentioned that last week there were other incidents that happened too. Are there other things you want to share from that week?
Yeah. So we're on the same defensive position. About a week past that incident, we had a loud explosion. I assumed that it was indirect, so artillery or mortar fire, which junta just fires indiscriminately. You can't essentially aim at what you're firing at with a mortar at the best of times, especially in terrain like that. But they don't care; they just fire it regardless. Heard a loud explosion, and then we all sort of looked at each other, and then radio chatter started going off. And then I asked my interpreter, what was that? He said it was a mine. Actually, that reminds me. Sorry, I'll get to that later. He said that was a mine. And I said, okay. And I was waiting for all the information to get out first. I didn't want to interrupt. And then I saw sort of the commander of the section just sprint off down the hill. And I said, what's going on? And he said, a car has hit a mine. we need to go. Can you come with me to see if we need help? So I said, okay. And all the mines I encountered in Burma thus far were, we call them little toe popper mines. So they're pretty small. They can fit in the palm of your hand. I actually got a photo of one that we took out of a village that junta raided and left behind a surprise for some of the villagers coming back. They taught me how to sort of pull them out and to disarm them. I can send that later on if you like. But yeah, so all the mines I encountered were little toe poppers and that sort of stuff, which, keep in mind, are illegal, which are a war crime as per Geneva Convention. But we all know junta doesn't follow those laws. But so I was just assuming that the car ran over a little anti-personnel mine. So we started sprinting down. And like I was saying before, the language barrier sort of makes it hard getting information. But yeah, that's all I went off. So we sprinted down. We swung past our temporary base to start off with, and I grabbed my GoPro, which I took in there just to document all this stuff, as well as some more medical equipment that I had in my bag. And again, we sprinted down and come around a corner that we drove on. So this is the only road in and out through where we were in Karenni State. So we got there after about an hour of just sprinting down this hill, and started to smell sort of diesel and explosive in the air. And there was a sort of hill that was blocking the view of where the explosion actually happened. So the only thing I saw was two people laying on the ground, as well as that commander of the section that sprinted downhill. It turns out it was one of his friends that got hit and passed away pretty much straight away. And he was sort of slumped there, crying. He was pretty emotional. And then me and my interpreter ran up to the bodies, to assess if they were dead or not, or we could work on them. It was quite obvious that they were dead. They died straight away. One of them was a driver, so he was just a Karenni civilian trying to help the Karenni army. So he had a Toyota Hilux, which is just a pickup truck, small light-skinned pickup truck that he would drive us around in. And the other deceased person next to him was the general. So he essentially runs the Karenni army. So it was obvious that they were both dead. We just took a second. I asked my interpreter, where's the rest of them? As I said that, I turned around and saw the Hilux, and it was obvious that it wasn't any personnel mine. It was something completely different. It was just torn in two. And I'm sure the viewers and yourself saw the pictures of the vehicle on the Instagram. It was just torn in two. Fuel tank was open. It was terrible. So quickly ran over to the site. There was just men spread out everywhere. I think all up about 6 men were in the vehicle. So one in the driver's seat, and one in the passenger seat. So there was a general and the driver. They died straight away. And I mean, you look at the photos and you look at the driver's seat, and you can just tell that no one would survive that. And the rest of them, I think the other 4 were in the back of the tray. And they got flown out. Furthest one was about, I'd say, 15 yards from where the Hilux slammed back down. I remember when I was walking past the Hilux, just seeing the crater in the ground. It was huge. It was probably 6 feet deep. And then seeing the bamboo shoots as well, on top of the Hilux. You can tell the Hilux got lifted up probably a good 5 meters in the air and slammed back down. But one of my worries were a secondary mine as well. That's a common tactic some soldiers slash armies use. They'll set up a mine or an IED, improvised explosive device, and then set up a secondary when a force comes out to help. They'll get blown up as well. But I was a bit worried at that, so watching where I stepped. And then it was essentially just a mass casualty. There was four men just everywhere. So one of the Kurani medics spoke good English, really good guy. He was there working on him. So he was there for about 10 minutes prior to me getting there, and he tried his best to stabilize everyone, and he'd done a hell of a job. He was obviously trained to a good standard, which the Korean community, pay out of their own pocket for their medics to go and get trained in neighboring countries and that sort of stuff. I just went to the first guy I saw to assess him, ran my fingers through his head just to see if he's got any head wounds, and you can just tell in his eyes that he was just defeated and in shock. I think he lost a finger, so he was holding his finger. I think it was his index finger. So I sorted that out, moved on to the next, and the next guy that was sort of sitting up besides him, he was just slumped over, sort of half his face was pretty swollen. He bit his tongue off, or part of his tongue off, from the explosion. So sorted him out. He was pretty stable. He was good. Another one, head injury, which the medic already sorted out. He was conscious. He was just laying there. His mates were looking after him, checked him for injuries and that sort of stuff. Another one, broken leg. But by the time I got to him, his leg was swollen and 2 times the bigger than his other leg. But he was okay. And then I went to the last one that the medic was working on. So his leg was pretty bad. Just a bit of muscle holding on his leg. He was the furthest from the site, from the explosion, so he would have got thrown pretty hard. At the point, so when I got to him, he was conscious, and he had a bit of color in his skin. So we put the tourniquets on him. He didn't lose too much blood, obviously in huge amounts of pain. And another thing I want to bring up is the pain relief. Like, whether it's a Western army or in the Western world, you're in a car accident, and you're in severe pain. You're immediately going to get pain relief, and there wasn't any out here for these guys, which is terrible. Just he's screaming when we'll put the tourniquets on and that sort of stuff. No one should go through that, especially in 2024. It's horrendous. So we tried to sort him out. He had a lot of cuts and shrapnel wound all over his body. He started to lose conscious, so I woke him up probably a good 10 times, just because I knew that if he fell asleep, he's not going to wake up again. I asked the interpreter, where's the transport to get him out of here? And I'll just pause it there. So when it comes to ambulances or someone getting injured, or a mother, going into birth in a village, they can't call anyone. They've got no one. They've got less than no one to help them. They've got no police force. I mean, their police force kill them, so they're not going to call them. They can't go to the hospitals because they get bombed. So, whether it's a wartime injury or just a run-of-the-mill injury, they've got no one. So the road that we took in, which took us about 3 hours to get through, it was absolutely horrendous. And that's the same road in and out that these men are going to need to take to get to the neighboring country's hospital where they can get treated. And 4 hours is a long time, especially if you're injured like that. You usually only got an hour to be sorted out. But and one of the ways we actually got this road up and running is we had a captured enemy bulldozer, a huge bit of machinery that we used, and a crazy sort of fascinating aspect about it is, the bulldozer weighed about, I'd say, 30 tons. The Hilux probably weighs 3. The bulldozer ran over the mine and nothing happened. But the Hilux did. So a lot of it just comes down to luck. But so I asked my interpreter, we need to get him out of here. How far is it? And you got to keep in mind as well that there's no phone reception. The junta cuts down the phone lines in the country and shuts off the internet. And especially out there, you're not getting reception. So he said, fuck it, pretty much. I'll go down. So he sprinted down the hill for God knows how long. He managed to come across a guy, another soldier on his motorbike, and he took his dirt bike, and a few hours later he got there and told this truck to come pick him up. So then the truck came. At this point, the guy that was in a bad way, he was losing a lot of life. There's not much we could do. We tried to put an IV in, but he took a bit of fluid, but he was in too much shock, so his veins were retracted, so it was hard to get an IV in. But loaded them up. So I think we loaded we loaded 4 up. They were all still alive when we loaded them up. But the one that was in bad way, he unfortunately died on the way out. But the rest, so the other 3, so the one that lost his finger, broken leg, and the bitten off tongue, they all had a lot of other injuries as well, but they fortunately lived. And one of them actually got released recently, so that's good. But yeah, that pretty much, that was the last day I personally had on the front. A lot of us fell back because the general died, and he was sort of one of the higher leaders. They needed to have a funeral for everyone, which I talked about before, which was a huge funeral, and got to see how they sort of celebrate life in their community, which is a lot different to the way we do it. That was sort of the last day I had in Burma.
How do they celebrate life? What was that funeral like?
Yeah, so it was big. I've never been to a wedding with 500 people before, and the wedding was funded by the Caroni government. Down to all the food to feed these 500 people, to the caskets, which is good, even though they have, as we know, not a lot of money to do that sort of stuff. They still done it. A lot of singing and dancing, and it was nice. It was nice to see that sort of stuff. They sort of had the 3 caskets in a shed, with soldiers sort of on standby next to it, as sort of a ceremonial thing, and the family there, which was sad to see. The families, they were from the refugee camp as well. Two of the men that died, the general and driver, left behind a 1-year-old boy, a 5-year-old boy, and a wife in the refugee camp, as well as the general. He left behind some young kids as well. But the young boy that died, which was when I was working on, he was only 19. And one of the bad things about that is, I remember asking my interpreter, is his family here? And he said no, they couldn't get here in time. His mum and dad and family couldn't get here in time because they were in Caroni State, too dangerous for them to make their way there. And plus, there's no morgues, so as bad as it sounds, you need to have a funeral pretty quickly. You can't put them in a cold morgue and that sort of stuff. So time is on the essence. So they really couldn't see their son be buried, which is sad. But yeah.
Right. That's a really harrowing last week you had there.
Yeah, it was pretty big.
Right. You mentioned earlier how at the break of the conflict with when the coup erupted and the Karenni began to resist, how they had, as we all know, very little international support, didn't have weapons or training or that sort of thing. You landed after years of them having to sort out how to procure equipment as well as training and protocols and everything else. Not to say that there hasn't been, obviously EAOs for decades, but this is another level of resistance and armed resistance especially. And so again, being conscious of security here, I wonder how much you can go into what kind of weapons they had, as well as the organization
Yeah.
of the resistance.
Yeah. So from a soldier's perspective, when I initially got there, they're a very professional army. I remember my interpreter using sort of Western soldier sort of slang, and I was quite impressed. And so they're quite professional. They follow the Geneva Convention, and I'm sure they don't have to, but they're essentially what the junta should be. Um, you know, they take prisoners. The junta would not hesitate killing all of us, or they wouldn't do it straight away. They would probably torture us first, but they're very, very professional. The way they move, their tactics, and that sort of stuff. They could work on a few things, but I think given the amount of time they were doing it and their experience, I thought that's sort of how they got that. And as funny as it sounds, they learn a lot of this stuff from YouTube as well. So they're really trying to do their best. But in terms of weapons, they're not the best at all. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. They're not the best, but yeah, they're trying. So
And you reference how some of the fortified military bases that are there,
yeah,
how they're resupplied. We've covered that in many past episodes. We've also covered from stories from Karenni, from Chin, from other places about bases that actually could be overrun, but they're not, because overrunning them then results in very harsh retaliatory airstrikes, and so they're actually left up strategically. But I'm wondering if you have any sense of just in terms of numbers or estimates or presence, just what we're looking at in terms of the military and the soldiers that are still have some kind of foothold in Karenni.
So the base that executed those IDPs, we had on good authority they had about 30 to 40 soldiers at that base, but they had a larger base with about 120 men, about a kilometre to the south of them, so they could be reinforced quite quickly. So that's always a dangerous thing when it comes to pushing them out. But yeah, two bases I know of that are in Karenni State. There are a handful, but the Karenni are doing a good job in pushing them out. So
Right. It is, you think about how fortified the bases are, and the obvious advantages they have in terms of air superiority and equipment and everything else. At the same time, listening to this, you also can't help but think those numbers aren't huge. They don't seem like.
yeah, it's not big at all. But one of the big force multipliers that the junta have, or the advantages that they have, is both of these bases are pretty much on a hilltop, a flattened hilltop, and fighting uphill, you're going to take huge casualties, and it's extremely hard. I mean, you imagine walking up or hiking up a hill with all your gear, and you're on all fours pretty much, just trying to not to fall over, and then you're fighting up it. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do. So yeah.
If it's that hard for resistance forces to go up, I would imagine that also the soldiers must not come down very often either.
Yeah, well, that's what I initially thought, but then they started going out and executing IDPs and that sort of stuff, and I suppose they had to because they weren't getting resupplied, and they would have starved. So probably a necessity for them. But yeah, I mean, if they do get orders to go out and do that sort of stuff, and any soldier has to follow them. So, yeah.
Right. So you mentioned how after this experience of going and helping out the way that you did and seeing the vast need in terms of the medical needs that are there, that you feel that your involvement is far from finished. So what more do you want to do as you continue with this?
Yeah. So, I mean, as much as we could do from, you know, from another country, one of my initial goals to going there is awareness. Like I told you, I didn't even know where Burma was. I didn't know what was happening over there. And 99.9% of people I talk to, from all walks of life, don't know what's going on there as well. And so awareness is a huge thing. It's just a kick in the teeth that these people are going through all that and the world doesn't know. So, I have a church group as well that I want to bring awareness to. There are a lot of Quranic communities at this church group as well. But yeah, so to answer your question, I want to bring awareness, as well as essentially starting a charity to finance medical equipment and that sort of stuff. One of the people, one of the guys that smuggled me back into the neighboring country, he was the same age as me, so he's quite young, but his English was pretty good. He's actually a principal at a school, and I was on the back of his scooter, and we were riding along this pretty treacherous road for quite a number of hours, and he told me his school that he ran in Karenni State got bombed twice. The first time it got bombed, there were unfortunately kids in there, and they suffered quite a lot. And the second time was when they did rebuild it away from the original position, got bombed twice. Fortunately, they were out at the time, but yeah. So he's now tried a third time. So he runs a school in the refugee camp, so not in Burma. And yeah, he was just telling me he just got Starlink. So another charity just gifted him a Starlink that he had to wait quite a few years for. And, Starlink only costs 2,000 US. And to us, it doesn't seem a lot, but he was waiting 2 years for it. And it helps out immensely. And he's also doing an online course from England that he's doing in education. So he goes to the Starlink every day in the middle of the jungle, and he jumps on his laptop and does an online course that comes out of England. So him telling me all these stories and this stuff, I took my education for granted, as most of us did in countries like this. There was days I didn't go to school, or I woke up and I didn't want to go to school and that sort of stuff, or I didn't put in a lot of effort. And my parents didn't have to pay for school, and it was a good school, like most Western countries. And this guy and these kids would do absolutely anything to have even a bit of an education.
It's incredible.
Books that we use as paperweights, it's gold to them. They actually want to read these books, and they would do anything. These kids would do anything for these books.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to try and give him the support he needs. Haven't really figured out what that looks like yet, but might be in the form of books, like I said, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's only one guy's story. He's a principal of a small school. There's only 30 kids there, and there's hundreds of thousands of kids out there that want to go to school.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about yourself? Are you thinking about taking a return trip there?
Yeah, I'll definitely go back at some point. Yeah, I mean, you can do so much from abroad, and it helps, sure, but the real help is boots on the ground. So yeah,
and I think there are people listening to this that are. Well, let me break it down. I think that certainly we have large numbers of Burmese diaspora and Burmese in country as well listening that I think probably feel just an overwhelming sense of the solidarity and support that doesn't get out there as much. Often there's a feeling of real isolation, and to hear stories that go against that, even if it's a single individual, I think is really inspiring to know that they're not alone in this. But I think there's also a large number of Westerners and others listening that will often reference to me a feeling of, I've characterized it as this helpless outrage, this just hearing these one terrible story after another about a place that they care about, they have some connection to, and just not really knowing what they can do. And I think certainly not everyone listening can do what you've done, would have the background or the volition or to take the risk. A very small number step up in that kind of way, and yet there are more ways to be involved and to stand up and to show support. You've taken it to quite an extreme, incredible example of what you've done, but that's not the only option for those listening. And so for someone who, as yourself, who has chosen to have been involved and show support in the wide number of ways that you have, for those listening that have that sense of helpless outrage and wanting not to be helpless, wanting to do something and not exactly knowing what that is in their capacity, whatever it is, what words would you have?
Yeah, good question. So there are a huge number of NGOs, sort of charities that do good work over there. To name a few, there's Free Burma Rangers. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know what they do. There's a new one, Stronghold Rescue. They actually, Ephraim Matos, I believe is his name. He's an ex-Navy SEAL in America. He pretty much done what I done and went over there, and he noticed that that they need ambulances. They need ambulances desperately. And like I just told you about the story of us hitting the landmine. He has a charity, and he's put together, I think, 4 ambulances that they're sort of 4-wheel drive Hiluxes that he's fitted out. He's also got a boat as well in Karen State. So they save lives every day, and they not only save soldiers' lives, but like I was saying before, pregnant women that need to get to a hospital, or broken arms, or just everyday stuff. There weren't any ambulances to begin with for these people, but he does awesome work. So his company is called Stronghold Rescue. So there's heaps of things we can do. I wouldn't necessarily recommend do what I done, but you give $1 a day to a good charity that helps these people. It's gonna get kids food. It's gonna get all sorts of stuff.
Well, I thank you for that. I thank you for sharing what you've done, which is just tremendous, and having the story to be able to go out and inspire others to know what's going on and to realize and to find their own sense of agency. As you say, not everyone can do what you've done, but there's each according to his own capacity. There's simply taking the 90 minutes to listen to this interview as a way of opening one's mind and one's heart to understanding that something is happening and choosing to care about it instead of the 90 minutes that could be spent elsewhere. And so I think these are inspiring messages. Yeah,
the Karenni people and the Burmese people, they're strong. They're very strong. Like you take these Burmese soldiers, for example. There's only a couple, Karenni soldiers, for example. There's only a couple thousand. They don't get paid at all. That they're only in it for freedom. A lot of them has had families killed at the hands of the Burmese soldiers. So they want to step up and do something. And an interesting fact I learned as well is, like I said, they don't get paid, but the community takes care of them. So you'll have a family that don't know a soldier, but they'll have him in for dinner or give him rice, and that's their payment sort of thing. Is the community knows that these people are protecting them, whether that's in the refugee camp or if that's in the country, and that's their payment, sort of thing. There's not a lot of money to go around at all, even before the coup. So yeah, that's an interesting fact that I learned too.
So it's a real community effort.
Yeah, absolutely. The sense of community is huge. I mean, you look at the funeral. There's 600 people there.
So do you feel that in some way you've become part of that community?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the furthest thing from Karenni, given my background and my heritage and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I very much feel part of them now. I want to keep going back. Me going around the country and being introduced to all these people and that sort of stuff. They don't know me, but they would just come up to me and they would just say thank you. And I'm just one guy, and they're thankful for me actually giving a shit, you know? So yeah, they're thankful for everything, because like I said, it breaks my heart. They know what's going on in Ukraine, and they know what's going on with all the other wars, and the world's helping them, but they have absolutely nothing, you know? The mother that I would talk to, and her kids were executed or they were bombed, she's got no support. Like the family that those two dead left behind, she's got to take care of. The wife has to take care of two young kids now. Because the dad was trying to do his bit and trying to protect his family, because they all want to go back to Karenni State. These 20,000 people, these 100,000 people in these refugee camps, they want to go back to their home, but they can't because they'll be killed. So what is she meant to do now? There's not much help for her, but I tried my best to give him some money, but it's not much. But yeah, the community got around the family and will prop them up financially and spiritually and emotionally for as long as they need, because that's just what they do there. But yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you what kind of reception you had from those you were coming into contact with. You must have been quite the unusual sight, as well as if you had, if you heard anything about anyone else coming from a foreign country that was being involved in the way that you were in the region.
Yeah. So the reception I got initially, you get a few curious looks and that sort of stuff. But they open up to you once they figure out why you're there and you actually want to help. They really opened up to me after the mine incident. I suppose they just saw me helping out. They do get a few journalists as well, Western or white journalists over there. But as far as where I was, I think it would be safe to assume that the last time a white person was, where I was in the World War. So it's a very untouched country, very untouched.
Many listeners know that in addition to running these podcast episodes, we also run a nonprofit, Better Burma, which carries out humanitarian projects across Myanmar. While we regularly post about current needs and proposals from groups on the ground, we also handle emergency requests, often in matters that are quite literally life or death. When those urgent requests come in, we have no time to conduct targeted fundraisers, as these funds are often needed within hours. So please consider helping us to maintain this emergency fund. We want to stress that literally any amount you can give allows us to respond more flexibly and effectively when disaster strikes. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Oba yarananda dayananga yaranaya dayanam boda yaranamano